Blade, as usual, ordered curry in the cafeteria. When he and Arnest were looking for a place to sit, they noticed a student celebrating their birthday with friends. Curious, Blade asked what they were doing. Arnest replied that they were celebrating a birthday. Innocently, Blade asked again what a birthday was. Based on Blade's question at that moment, Arnest now explained it to the other girls. She wanted to celebrate Blade's birthday too, but the problem was Blade didn't know when he was born. However, Dayon stated that she knew Blade's age from his behavior. When he was picked up, Blade could already walk. If we calculate it, he's approximately 17 years old. Previously, Dayon had been told when Blade was picked up. From what she remembered, it was about 1 month from now. She said he was holding a sword when he was picked up. That's why he was named Blade. Now they just needed to think of a gift for Blade. They didn't know what object Blade wanted. They only thought of one thing: curry. Suddenly, the headmaster appeared behind them. He had heard about their idea of giving curry as a gift. The headmaster thought of not giving ordinary curry. They would prepare a very special curry. After that, the headmaster gathered all the students in one of his facilities. Behind a modern-looking door, he said that it was the kingdom's pride and joy, a food storage facility. The headmaster wanted the students to simulate training in that place. Unexpectedly, behind that door was an expansive forest. In the center, there was a tall, towering tree. They couldn't believe all of this was beneath the kingdom's palace. Suddenly, the door they had passed through closed tightly. The headmaster explained that the door wouldn't open until all the conditions given were met. The condition was that all participants had to consume a total of 11,300,000,000 kilocalories. In other words, one person had to consume 100 million kilocalories. However, there was no need to worry about food. Since ancient times, this place had stored a food source. The problem was that they had to obtain it from dangerous animals and plants in this place. Blade felt that this was too dangerous for the students. He was sure Arnest felt the same way. However, Blade was confused when Arnest and the other students were very enthusiastic about doing it. After securing a campsite, they began hunting a large animal in the area. Jessica used her scent as bait to lure it into the prepared trap hole. Somehow, in the midst of the chase, the animal stopped pursuing Jessica and instead went after Claire. Leonard tried to save her, but he was immediately thrown back by the creature's attack. Maria had to summon Mao to deal with the situation. With her lightning magic, she was able to incapacitate the animal and drop it into the trap hole. That night, the students worked together to process the meat from the large animal they had hunted earlier. Not only that, others engaged in various tasks to ensure their survival in this place. Some were sewing clothes, discussing reconnaissance missions, making weapons, tending to wall defenses, and so on. After all of that, Blade relaxed alone in the hot spring. Arnest secretly wanted to enter the hot spring as well. She didn't even use a towel to cover herself, so she told Blade not to peek. Arnest became curious upon seeing the large scar on Blade's body. She asked about Blade's childhood. Blade only remembered spending time fighting for 24 hours a day. Not training, but actual combat. Every day he had only two choices: become strong or die. Arnest felt pity after hearing his story. She then gently touched the scar on Blade's body and moved closer to him. However, Claire suddenly appeared and told them not to go any further. Several days later, the civilization they had built was quite advanced. According to Iona's calculations, they had consumed 47% of the calories needed to reach their target. They could complete the target before the deadline. On that day, the headmaster arrived and announced that he had prepared a special mission. He wanted the students to gather the food items on the list he had written. The other students seemed very excited when they saw it. However, Blade was confused about how it was different from the food they had already collected. First, they hunted a cabbage monster, more precisely, the Cabbage Emperor. It was cabbage stored in the royal warehouse and had gone wild due to the harsh environment. It was a type that had adapted and evolved. Initially, Arnest wanted to burn it all down. However, Sophie reminded them that they needed it raw. With enthusiastic cooperation from each individual, they finally managed to capture the Cabbage Emperor. Next, they were going to capture the Corn Puncher. The corn had to be defeated in a boxing match. Otherwise, it wouldn't taste good when eaten later. They engaged in an intense boxing match, and eventually, the corn puncher was defeated. Then, there were also tomato and chili monsters. There was even a sunflower monster capable of firing lasers. The flower could harness energy from sunlight to shoot lasers. Additionally, there was a carrot that was still in the ground. Initially, they thought it was just an ordinary carrot. Without being cautious, Blade approached to pull out the carrot. At that moment, Arnest just read something important about the carrot. Unfortunately, she warned Blade too late. The carrot suddenly made a very loud noise when Blade tried to pull it out. After that, Iona offered to pull out the carrots. She wasn't human, so she believed she wouldn't be affected. Even though the others had moved away, they could still feel the impact of the carrot's scream. It was so powerful that the trees around them immediately shed their leaves. The day had turned to evening, and they were now on their way to deliver the carrot. Along the way, Blade suddenly remembered that he didn't particularly like carrots. However, if they were in a dish, he didn't really mind. Arnest panicked for a moment upon hearing this. Afterward, the headmaster and the students held a feast to celebrate their success. The kingdom's pantry ecosystem had now transformed. It was estimated that the population would decrease tenfold in the coming years. However, it wasn't over yet. Tomorrow was the final day, the decisive day. The next day, they headed towards the giant tree in the middle of the area. The area around the tree had the highest nutritional content. It was highly likely that the Pantry King was there. And indeed, there was a gigantic minotaur monster carrying a hammer in that area. Just as they were about to attack the Pantry King, he suddenly disappeared, replaced by a larger figure behind him. That figure was a behemoth. The headmaster instructed the students to defeat the behemoth alone. He said that behemoth meat was far tastier than beef. And as usual, Blade was surprised to see the other students excited to take it on. After that, Arnest immediately transformed into her demon form. Followed by the others, they launched a simultaneous attack. The behemoth's body was incredibly tough. It still didn't fall after being attacked repeatedly by Sophie, Iona, Arnest, Q, and Mao. Then, Blade stated that he had to use a powerful technique to defeat it. Unfortunately, this technique couldn't be unleashed with only 15% of his strength. It required 30%. That's why Blade asked for Mao's help. He wanted Mao to give him spiritual power. Blade began to grasp Mao's hand to absorb his strength. However, Mao thought of a faster way. Without hesitation, Mao kissed Blade on the lips. Now, Blade still had to gather his fighting spirit to unleash the powerful technique. Meanwhile, the other students would try to distract the behemoth. Iona was also ready with her device to fire a giant laser at the behemoth. Meanwhile, Sophie restricted the behemoth's movement with her anti-gravity power. When the laser was fired, the behemoth received even more attacks than before, but it still couldn't hold it down. The other students took turns restraining the behemoth's movements. Shortly after that, Blade was ready to use his technique. With Mao's assistance, Blade recited the incantation for the sword technique, the Holy Demon Sword. The swing of the sword from that technique could directly cleave the behemoth in two. Mao remembered that this technique was what had defeated the previous Demon King. However, Blade immediately collapsed after using it. He wasn't as strong as before. Afterward, they all left the pantry and returned to the academy. After being examined at the infirmary, the nurse said that Blade could now use his power up to 18%. Blade was, of course, surprised why the number had increased after the previous incident. The nurse replied that it might be because Blade ate regularly, exercised, and maintained his health. Then the nurse asked if Blade had had lunch yet. It turned out that Blade had forgotten to eat. He immediately excused himself and went to the cafeteria. As he opened the door to the cafeteria, Blade was startled by the students who welcomed him while wishing him a happy birthday. Arnest explained that today was Blade's birthday. If his birth date was unknown, it was common to use the day he was picked up. In front of them, there was an enormous food cover. Claire explained that it was everyone's idea. Initially, they were confused about what gift to give. Finally, Arnest came up with this idea. Arnest then lifted the food cover they had prepared. Inside was a large plate of curry with all the ingredients sourced from the pantry the day before. This curry was very special because it used the finest ingredients in the world. They also explained that the headmaster had helped. After trying just one bite, Blade couldn't speak and seemed to be holding back something. He said that he had been told in the past that men shouldn't cry. The headmaster immediately denied it, saying that men's tears were meant for moments like this. In the name of Gilgamesh Soulmaker, he retracted his previous statement about men not being allowed to cry. With that, Blade began to shed tears. The curry he was eating was incredibly delicious. Blade thanked everyone. For the first time, he felt like he had been born into this world.